Loi Krathong last night? Did it rain? Were the floating krathongs getting poured on? Breathe and be aware as you do. You can't learn Dhamma truly through reading, listening, and thinking. That won't defeat the defilements. The Dhamma that we read is the Buddha's Dhamma, the Master's Dhamma. It isn't ours. The Dhamma that destroys the defilements comes out from our heart, live. That kills the defilements dead. The Dhamma in the scriptures, the teachings of the Masters, isn't our wisdom. It's their wisdom. It's their experience that they shared with us. If we want to wash away the defilements and free the mind from suffering, like the Masters did, then we have to practice. They saw the Dhamma and taught us. Now we have to try it and see. In the Buddha's time, some people had great merit. They got to meet the Buddha, listen to his Dhamma, some getting appropriate advice just for them. The results this way are quick. Some people, however, met the Buddha and ended up in hell. They infringed upon him. When the Buddha taught an individual, it was the Dhamma that was precisely for them. Others that were listening in also benefited. These days, it's extremely rare to get specific Dhamma for us. Luangpu could do it. Most other masters just teach what they did. Luangpu gave precise, individual advice. Once there was a layman who overheard Luangpu teaching something very peculiar to another. He requested Dhamma from Luangpu and Luangpu told him to contemplate one strand of hair. Just one strand. He told me that made him feel very insecure. Since then, he became a monk and a good practitioner. He felt badly that others were getting such sophisticated Dhamma, and he had to just stare at a piece of his hair. So he didn't do it. During the Buddhist Lent, he went to practice in Nong Khai province with a different master. I would go up there often, actually, once Luangpu passed, to see Luangpu Tet. Anyway, this guy would practice by inclining his mind towards burning his body. But it wouldn't burn. It would just get toasty. It wouldn't burn. The entire Buddhist Lent was unsuccessful for him. When he went back to Surin province to Luangpu and report how the Lent went, he remembered to try what Luangpu had told him to do. So, he observed one strand of hair. It has this color, this form, this scent. It isn't permanent. It's short, and it gets long. When it's too long, it falls out. It isn't me. When it gets cut off, it isn't me. So, he was contemplating in this way. That's not vipassana, but his mind entered jhana from this practice. Then he went to report this practice to Luangpu. Once he did what Luangpu had told him to do, it took no time at all to get results. Luangpu would teach some people to meditate and others to practice vipassana directly. He told me to watch my mind. He didn't teach me to repeat puto or to contemplate the hair, nails, teeth, and skin. Nope. I've only met one master who can do this. He told some people to observe their bones. If they didn't, they wouldn't succeed. These days, we don't have a master like that, and we don't have the Buddha to rely on and to tell us precisely what to do for success. Masters now teach what it is that they did. If it matches our skill set, then we succeed. If it doesn't, then we don't. Luangpu Dun taught me to observe my mind, and it didn't take long to understand what he taught. I went to Luangpo Put, and he told me to spread the Dhamma, because there are many people with a similar demeanor to mine. It would be a wasted opportunity if others didn't get a chance to listen to my instruction. I was confused at that time. He wanted me to share what I had done, to observe the mind. In those days, everyone was just watching the body. I thought, no one does that. Who would listen to me? I didn't know what to do, so I collected my experiences in a book and published it. Just 3 chapters or so. I felt, okay, I did what Luangpo Put asked me to. I used a pen name, not my real name. I didn't leave any contact information. Even though I was paid for this, being published, I told them to donate the money somewhere else. I didn't want to receive money from the Dhamma, and I didn't want anyone to know who I was. People would ask, who wrote that? The publisher would say, oh, I think he's a monk now, probably living in a forest somewhere. Some people asked Luangpo Put, who is this author? Luangpo Put didn't say, but rather, oh, he comes here often. He'd say, but he's not here today. I observed that if a meditation or technique isn't suitable for our demeanor, then we won't develop easily. These days, observing the mind is suitable for modern minds. We are obsessive thinkers. It's called Titi Charita, or view temperament, political and opinionated. In the texts, they teach that mindfulness of the body, or rupa, and sensations, vedana, foundations, are appropriate for meditative temperaments. Mindfulness of mind, or citta, and natural processes, or dhammas, foundations, are suitable for analytical, opinionated types. These days, there are so many thinkers, so observing our hearts and minds is most appropriate. Luangpu Dun declared in 1983, in the future, observing the mind will become prosperous in the cities. He emphasized the cities, those like us, here, that work using our thoughts, thinking all day. To meditate, arrive at peace, and then contemplate the body and the sensations won't work. We won't get tranquil enough. We'll sit until we're blue in the face and maybe get just one moment of peace, and the mind gets busy again. The practice for those who aren't able to achieve peaceful states is observing our mind. Luangpu Dun said this, once I was watching my mind, practice in observing my mind, and once I saw I was worrying about getting caught in the rain. The mind entered deep concentration. The world and my body disappeared. Only the mind remained. When I reported this to Luangpu Dun, he told me that my mind had entered deep in meditation. And he told me very specifically which levels. When he said that, I told him I wasn't meditating, that I was observing my mind. Luangpu Dun said, observing the mind leads to automatic jhana. That's what he said. Observing the mind and developing wisdom. It's called wisdom leads to samadhi. Observing the mind correctly, and samadhi will arise. If we observe the body, the samadhi then leads to wisdom. Once look deep down and subtle, our mindfulness, samadhi, and wisdom are more subtle. and especially if we're an expert in jhana, we'll be able to develop wisdom in the jhanas. That's called wisdom and samadhi in unison. These days, it's very hard to find someone who can do that. It's hard to find jhana meditators. Those that can develop wisdom in the jhanas have to be skilled in 4 areas. The first is entering jhana. They can enter it at will. The second is sustaining jhana. Some of us have a moment of jhana and then bounce right out. That's not an expert at sustaining jhana. The third is expertise in developing wisdom in jhana. To do this, we must observe the mind. The fourth is seeing the jhanas arising and falling. Like we see initial and sustained attention, sustain and then pass. See rapture sustain and then pass. Samadhi arise, sustain and pass. Equanimity arise, sustain and pass, etc. Seeing rapture, happiness, equanimity arise, sustain, and pass, moving up and down the jhanas. Sometimes we enter at the 4th jhana and then move down to the 2nd. It doesn't have to be all in order. A true expert can enter at the 1st jhana and jump to the 8th. They don't have to go from 1 to 8. And when coming out, they don't have to go down from the 8th to the 1st. There's no need. We can start at the 1st jhana, skip to the 3rd, then go up to the 4th, and back down to the 2nd. It's all doable. But you all can't do that because your minds are too busy. That is for those who have cultivated this in past lives, for past experts reborn. If you try, you won't get far. I've seen masters teach the 16 stages of mindfulness of the in and out breath. Following this can take you all the way to arahantship. The first 4 stages are regarding the body. The second 4 are for vedana. The third are mind. And the 4th are natural processes. So following this pattern covers the entirety of the 4 foundations of mindfulness. It is truly an exemplary practice. These teachings are in the Anapanasati Sutta. Some teachers taught it, but I don't know anybody that can actually succeed at it. Most people can't make it to the 1st jhana, so never mind higher jhanas beyond that. If you can't enter jhana, then observing the body and sensations will be difficult. The mind will be restless and uncomfortable. Sitting and watching the body and its sensations, the mind will withdraw from concentration. It won't be able to handle the pain. If we don't have sufficient concentration, then we practice as poor people, as paupers, and survive on spare change. Observe our minds. Yesterday, I taught practicing picking a meditation object, but not doing so to be calm. Just choosing an object that we're able to observe and then watch our mind's behavior, like breathing in put and breathing out to. The mind is restless, so know it's restless. Breathing in put and breathing out to, and the mind is calm, so know it's calm. Breathing in put and breathing out to, and if the mind has suffering, know it has suffering. Breathing in put and breathing out to, and if it's happy, then know it's happy. Breathe And if the mind is wholesome, know so. If it's unwholesome, know so. Breathing in put and breathing out to. And if there's greed that comes up, like wanting the mind to be concentrated, see that there is greed. Breathing and then annoyed, thinking, why can't I just get peaceful? Know that the mind is annoyed. Breathing in put and breathing out to. And if the mind strays to some other topic, know that the mind has gotten busy. Breathe and know your mind. Happiness, peace, or goodness are not the objective. The objective is to know and see your own mind. Then when you know your mind, that is mindfulness of the mind, or citta foundation. We will obtain samadhi from this. At the beginning state of observing the mind, we will gain samadhi. People think that when they're observing the mind, that they're practicing vipassana right away. But it isn't so quite yet. In the beginning, the mind doesn't have the knower in order to practice vipassana. The aggregates won't separate. So in the beginning, breathe in and out, repeating putto, or choose another meditation object and know the mind. When you see that the mind is working like this and that, and feeling this and that way, know the phenomena that are occurring as they actually are. Like when the mind is restless, angry, and greedy, know so. Especially know the mind that strays off to think. If we correctly know what is actually happening, then the observer or knower will arise. But most masters didn't teach as I do, to watch and observe all the different mental phenomena that mindfulness knows, and then the knower arises. That's too complicated. Just pick one thing, and when the mind strays off, know so. It strays off again, know so. Most masters just address the thinking. Luangpu Tian taught to move the arms, and when the mind strays to think, to know so. Not moving the arms, just to move them. You could also watch the movement of the abdomen. When the mind strays to think, know so. When the mind moves in towards the abdomen, know so. Watch the object and know the mind. If you know the mind correctly, as it is, the mind that gets lost in watching, focusing, or thinking, they all fall away. And the knower will replace it automatically. Once we have the knower, that is samadhi. It's beginner samadhi, but is sufficient for vipassana. This is khanika, or momentary samadhi. No need to strive for appana or jhana. Just khanika is sufficient. Samadhi isn't easy, but khanika, or momentary samadhi, is not too difficult for regular people to accomplish. So, pick an object and notice the mind that strays again and again. Each time that we see the mind stray, the mind will be the stable knower for a moment. That's why it's called momentary. And when the moments are close together in succession, it will appear to us as if the samadhi is continuous. But actually, it is separate moments, that the mind is a knower and then falls away. The next mind that arises is another mind, that is the knower again. Then that one falls away, and another knower mind arises. So it's as if we're knowing for a long time. I practiced meditation at first, and then with Luangpu Dun, I practice as we do, in this momentary way. Luangpu Dun taught me to observe the mind, and then the knower became prominent. Other masters, like Luangpu Sim, called me the knower. It was a nickname he gave me. Not the wanderer, lost in thoughts, but the knower, awakened and radiant. Why the knower? Because the mindfulness was sharp. The mind would stray and then know immediately. The mind was the stable observer. So let's observe the mind. We're not jhana meditators. No appana, no upachara, or access concentration isn't easy. We need an object that can lead to bright light or an inner vision, like the breath or the earth, wind, fire, or water elements that lead to bright light. Then you must be able to manipulate that light and make it expand and contract in order to confirm that it is access. That's called upachara or access concentration. You can't do that. Never mind entering jhana. So we're like poor people who can't invest $1 billion or will just end up $1 billion in debt. Just be a poor person and collect stamps. One day, we will be wealthy by way of morality and Dhamma. So choose a meditation object and know the mind that strays to think or to focus on the object. Those are the big ones, especially the thinking. Then the mind will become the knower, awake and radiant. Once the mind is the stable observer, then we develop wisdom by way of observing the body, feelings, mind, or dhammas. Some masters have a theory that to be stream enterers, we watch the body. To become once returners, we observe the sensations. To become non-returners, we observe the mind. And to become arahants, we observe the dhammas. That sounds great, but it isn't what the Buddha taught. Some teachers say that we can watch the body all the way to being a non-returner and then watch the mind to become arahant. Some teachers say that from experience. Is his experience correct? Well, it's his experience, so it's correct for him. But in the texts, it is explained that all 4 foundations of mindfulness are doors leading in from 4 directions, and we can enter from any of the doors. Nirvana can be attained through the body door, the sensation door, the mind door, or the Dhamma's door. Any of the 4 foundations is sufficient. For example, Ananda attained arahantship by the body foundation. Moggallana and Sariputta attained through Vedana foundation. Anuruddha attained by the mindfulness foundation. The Buddha himself by the Dhamma foundation. So there are examples of each. It's possible through any of them. If we can't go by the way of the body, well, the Vedanas are even harder. Then we came to observe the mind. There are 2 pairs. Those of a greedy temperament, those that are always wanting, practice jhana, attaining samadhi first, and then observe the body and the Vedana, that pair. The body is easier, and the Vedana is those who have strong spiritual faculties. Mindfulness of the mind is appropriate for view temperament with weaker spiritual faculties. Observing the Dhamma foundation is suitable for view temperament and strong spiritual faculties. There is a lesson appropriate for everyone, but it's not precise. There are some exceptions. Do whatever practice makes you prosper the most. The texts are guidelines. Some people stray from them. There are 6 different temperaments for samatha meditation: craving, aversion, delusion temperaments, the intelligent, ruminating temperaments, and what's the last one? I forgot. Faithful temperament. I forgot that one. I wasn't the faithful type. I don't believe anything that can't be proven. Even to this day, I just listen. People tell me this master is a reincarnation. I just listen indifferently. If they talk too long, I walk away. It's nonsense. What value does the past have? It's only important right here and now. If we're good or bad, it's here in the present. It isn't in the past. So I don't have much faith. The faith arises after wisdom. Like now, I have utter faith in the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. I believe completely in the law of karma. I believe every action has a consequence. If you want the results, you have to put in the causes. I believe we need effort, that nothing is free in this world. There's only doing the work. These are what I believe. I believe in karma. I believe that action yields results. I believe we have to invest and put in the work. Nothing is a fluke. Nothing is free. We need effort. We need to fight. So these are some of my experiences. Practice with a home base, but don't attempt for happiness or peace. The main thing is observing the mind, seeing the mind stray. It strays to think, we know so. It strays toward objects, know so. Practice that a ton, and then your mindfulness and samadhi will improve. When there is mindfulness and samadhi, you don't have to worry about wisdom. Just keep observing, and eventually, mindfulness will appear more and more often from recollecting different phenomena. The mind will stray, and mindfulness will know immediately. Then the mind won't stray off, and samadhi will arise. Viriya is the effort regarding our fight against the defilement. Familiarize yourself with the developments, especially today. I'm recommending delusion or getting lost. The mind wanders off and knows so, again and again. When we know that the mind moved, the mind that moved or got lost will fall away. And in the moment of knowing, the mind won't be lost. Whenever the mind lacks mindfulness, it's lost. And in the moment of knowing, the mind got lost, the mind is a knower again. The nowhere mind is the mind with correct samadhi. So mindfulness arises, samadhi arises. So there is viriya, sati, and samadhi. In such a case, no need to fear. Wisdom and liberation will occur. In the noble path, there is right view, right thought. This is on the level of theory, teaching to see things in the right way, thinking the right way, right speech, action, and livelihood. These are regarding morality. Right effort, right mindfulness, and right stability are mental training. But there are actually 2 more in the path. After right stability, there is right knowledge. That is wisdom arising. When there is samadhi, there will be wisdom, because samadhi is the proximate cause for wisdom. When there is right knowledge, then there is right liberation. Why does liberation need the word right before it? Because there is wrong liberation, like sitting in meditation and the mind is empty and not fabricating thoughts. That's wrong or incorrect liberation. It's sitting and getting hazy without awareness, thinking that you've freed your mind, and the mind is empty or bright or just happy for years, thinking that it's liberation. That is wrong liberation. It's an imposture. You have to develop the things I'm talking about. Listening to what I'm saying here is starting to build right view conceptually, having the right theories down. Knowing what the Buddha taught about karma, the results of actions. Knowing about what effort is, mindfulness is, knowing the Four Noble Truths of suffering, its cause, cessation, and path. Cessation is realized. It isn't something that is done. The path is developed. The path is morality, mental training, and wisdom. Our job with respect to suffering is knowing it as it is. The body and mind is what we call suffering. We are to know the body and mind as they are. So we need to know theoretically what the Buddha taught. That's beginner stages of right view, before the practice. We need to know that our job with regards to the cause of suffering is to eliminate it. Eliminate craving. Our duty with respect to suffering is to know it, and with respect to craving is to eliminate it. Do we want to eliminate suffering? Right? And we try to eliminate suffering, but whenever we try to do that, we are practicing incorrectly. The Buddha taught us to know suffering, not to eliminate it. We have to eliminate the wanting, but we're wanting to eliminate suffering. We won't concede that we have to eliminate wanting. So our practice falters. We don't succeed. If our principles are correct, then the practice isn't so hard. Cessation is to be realized. That is nirvana. Why don't we make nirvana arise? Because it doesn't arise and it doesn't fall. Whatever arises falls away. Nirvana is to be known, seen, experienced, sustained. Who remains in nirvana? The mind that is completely pure remains in nirvana. Keep practicing. Our job with respect to the path is to develop it. Developing morality, the mind and wisdom by having mindfulness observes the mind. This requires mindfulness that sees the defilements when they arise. Then we won't break precepts. When the mind is restless and mindfulness sees that, then samadhi will arise. Then the mind is a knower. And then the mind gets lost, and the knower again, then lost again. Just observing the mind in this way can lead us all the way to liberation from suffering. That's wisdom development. Eventually, there will be wisdom regarding the knower itself. The knower is something truly special. It's in fact the most special thing, with the one exception of wisdom. Wisdom is the most special Dhamma in the world. In order to obtain it though, samadhi or the knower is required. In order to achieve wisdom, it is the mind with correct samadhi that's needed. So we require the knower mind by seeing the mind stray repeatedly from its object. Keep practicing and wisdom will arise. If we have enough samadhi, We can observe the body, or Vedana, or the mind, or Dhammas. Practice seeing the mind stray repeatedly, as I recommend, is within the mind foundation. It's the mind having delusion, and knowing the mind has delusion. It's the mind not having delusion, and knowing it doesn't. Why am I emphasizing delusion? Because in order for greed or anger to arise, there has to be delusion first. Without delusion, there is no greed or anger. So this is defeating the leader of the army of defilements. Defeat the leader, and the rest will fall. The main delusion is ignorance. But let's not mess with that yet. It's the heavyweight champ. We're still flyweights. Let's make sure we compete against our weight class. We can't fight ignorance yet because we won't see it. It's the hardest thing to see. It is embedded in the knower itself. Once we truly achieve the knower, then we can see the not knowing, embedded within it. Not knowing what? Not knowing the Four Noble Truths. The mind needs to be fully realized to understand this. So, what do we need to do? Have mindfulness that guards the mind. Don't break moral precepts. When the mind is restless, know so, and samadhi will arise. Once there is samadhi, the mind is the knower. Don't try to hold the knower. The mind will be the knower, and then in a moment it will be the thinker. And then it's the knower, and then it's the focuser. Then it's a knower, and then it's lost in looking, hearing, and thinking. It just keeps changing. You'll see that even the knower is not reliable because it is impermanent. It isn't reliable because it cannot be controlled. When we see that, then we can let go of the knower. Once we release the knower, there isn't anything else to release. It all ends here. So keep practicing. Start with mindfulness that observes the mind and sees the defilements. The mind gets lost and then knows so. Practice that a lot. No excuses. Oh, I'm just going to play on the internet for 3 hours, and then I'll observe my mind after that. You won't get anywhere. During yesterday's festival, some people's minds were unwholesome. Watching the candles and floating flowers in a daze, lost. Some people sent floats into the water to offer it to the Buddha. That's a more wholesome mind. Some people send out their little floats on the water on behalf of their parents or teachers that are too old and don't have the energy to do so. So telling their teacher that they did it on their behalf. They're following the tradition, but not just for our entertainment, but to please our elders is a wholesome action. It is meritorious, but it isn't exactly wholesome. Wholesome states fight the defilements. Merit is to be with the world. But many followed the tradition, but did so unwholesomely, drinking alcohol and sending their floats into the sea. What merit will they get from that? Never mind achieving wholesome states. Was that too hard today? Today was a bit easier than yesterday. That's enough for today. Time to listen to your homework. Question from student number 1. I understand that I'm in a period of developing wisdom in formal practice. I see the body suffering because of the breath. There's vibrating at the center of the chest all the time. The knower mind is up and above and bounded. The mind has weight to it. Sometimes when there is more samadhi, it feels more weighty. I feel like heaviness is oppression and suffering. I think I see that the aggregates are suffering, but the mind is not equanimous to the phenomena it sees. I'd like to ask if I've been developing wisdom with equanimity and can continue this way. Luangpu Pramote said, "You're practicing well, but there isn't true equanimity. You still want equanimity. Wanting to be equanimous isn't equanimous. Can you see that? They're still wanting. So the mind is still wanting. There's craving. Practice some samatha. Your mind is too busy. Breathe in put, breathe out to, or something similar. Make some time for it each day. By only developing wisdom, you won't get too far, because the mind will run out of energy. Practice samatha every day. Make some time for it. Even half an hour is fine. The rest of the time, practice mindfulness during the day. You're doing well. Seeing the vibration at the chest is good. The knower is separate, and seeing that the knower has boundaries to it. Do you feel uncomfortable? It is encapsulated. When I saw that, I couldn't stand it. I made a vow that as long as the mind was still in prison, like this, I'd never stop practicing. I had to get out of prison. That which is encapsulating the mind is the asava kilesa, the taints. When the mind liberates, it liberates from asava defilements. Don't hold the knower in place. You're secretly holding to it. There's the knower, and then you let the eyes, ears, nose, body, and mind make contact with objects, and there will be vibration in the chest resulting. Whether it's a good or bad object, there will still be the vibration. Keep watching and you'll see that other than suffering, there is nothing that arises in this world. Why is the knower tight at times? Because there is intending, trying to know all the time. So that's not equanimity towards the knower mind. You're still wanting the knower mind. That's a good one. That sees clearly. That's why it's tight. You're a diligent practitioner. That's great, and that pleases me. Next student. Question from student number 6. I'm more committed to my formal practice than ever. My practice is more natural. There has been a lot of worldly suffering in my life rushing in. I believe that I'm seeing the truth and accepting it more and more. I'm seeing phenomena as the observer and not slipping into them. I think there is progress. Thank you. Luangpu Pramote said, "Correct. I accept the thank you. You didn't ask anything. You just asked to thank me, so I accepted. Right now, your mind is uncomfortable and tight because you're nervous and then suppressing it. Just know the mind as it is, in a relaxed way. And when there are problems in our life, sometimes our mind gets immersed in them. If your mind does that, then don't sweat it too much. Just be impartial. Okay, that's what the mind's doing now. It wants to slip into things, then that's what it does. When our mind is impartial, it will slip out of suffering and just be the observer or knower of suffering. Practicing Dhamma, we have to know suffering, not to be immersed in it. They're totally different things. Knowing suffering, the mind has to be separate from it. The aggregates that are suffering are indistinguishable. Then we can develop wisdom. So if the mind is stuck in suffering, don't be shocked. Just know that the mind has sunk into it. Keep practicing and the mind will slip out of it. When the mind is equanimous, it comes out by itself. It will see that the world is a serious place only for lost and deluded people. Those that aren't deluded see the world is just like a dream. Sometimes there are good dreams, sometimes there are nightmares, but nothing really substantial. Keep practicing. Worldly suffering is not permanent. If it comes, then it can go. So don't add suffering to yourself by accumulating more defilements. Question from student number 8. I practice 2 hours a day, doing walking meditation, seeing the mind that strays, seeing the mind wander off. Sometimes I'm neutral towards it. Sometimes I like what I'm thinking about. Some days I walk lethargically and slowly, so I watch the body those times. I see the mind out and then use a mantra and repeat it quickly. Is there anything I need to add or improve for my suitable practicing? Luangpu Pramote said, what you're practicing is suitable for you, but there's a phenomenon you need to see more clearly. It's the mind that is out. Like now, the mind is out. Can you sense that? If you can see that, then you're fine. Don't pull it back. Just know it's out. And then keep practicing, and the mind will come back on its own. Don't pull the mind in. That will make it tight. If it's tight, then it's wrong. That means you've been controlling. Your mind is still busy, so take some time for samatha each day, to give the mind some power and energy. If we toss out samatha, we won't have energy and the mind won't move along properly. Not developing wisdom is not good, and developing wisdom too often is not good. We have to judge ourselves how much is just right. If our mind is calm and comfortable and we have energy, but we just keep it that way, then that isn't good. We need to find a way to get the wisdom practice going. Sometimes we need to encourage that by thinking about the body and mind, being of the 3 characteristics, to stimulate wisdom development. Then later, you'll be able to see the 3 characteristics demonstrating themselves. No need to think about them. You'll see the truth. When we're out of energy, then we come back to our meditation object and charge our energy. So we switch back and forth this way, and the mind will do a better job of walking along this path. Question from student number 17. I never really practiced until I joined a course with a friend of mine. There was an interesting phenomenon that happened, but then when I opened my eyes, I was shocked. Then for the next 3 hours, I saw thoughts coming and going, coming and going. There was a mindfulness that felt like me. It felt like I was filled with energy throughout my aura. After that, I felt that's the way to end suffering, and I became a Buddhist. But I'm not sure since that time if I've been practicing correctly or not. Luangpu Pramote said, well, you can know for yourself if you're practicing correctly. Are you seeing defilements often, or instead, are you seeing that you're great? If you're seeing lots of defilements, then you're developing. But if you're practicing and you don't see the defilements, that isn't good. If there are lots of defilements, but you don't practice, that's not good. That's the worst. But if you practice and you can see defilements coming up all day, then that's good. But if you're in courses learning with other teachers, then just ask those teachers. You don't have to ask me. Sometimes their techniques are different. The important thing is, if you're practicing according to my teachings, then your mind as it is right now is not correct. It's still. Can you notice that? You're forcing it still. When you hold the mind still like that, you can see lots of details. You can see many things too. But the mind is not comfortable, and it isn't practicing quality samadhi. It's tense. So you'll be confused if you learn from different places. Go talk to your teacher. Question from student number 32. I've been listening to your CDs for about 4 years. I practice walking and sitting for about 30 minutes. Can you point me in the right direction for my practice? Luangpu Pramote said, know the mind that gets lost. Your mind is a busy one. Can you see that? It's completely all over the place. So when you're practicing, the mind's busy, then know so. It's busy again, know so again, repeatedly. Can you see when the mind gets lost in thought? Can you know that? If you can know that, then that's good. Keep practicing. Take some time for formal practice as well. When you practice formally, don't make the mind being calm, happy, or good your objectives. Practice mindfulness and samadhi. When the mind is preoccupied, know so. Then the mind will be calm. If you try to force the mind to be peaceful, it won't be. Once the mind have energy, then practice wisdom. But now you're going after wisdom without enough samadhi. So practice meditation, and once you're calm, then see all the phenomena arising, falling, and changing. Keep watching. Actually, watching the mind can cause samadhi to occur if we are an expert at it, but it's risky, so I don't recommend it. When watching the mind, there are many approaches. Firstly, I thought I wasn't going to teach this, and here I go doing it again. There are 4 things one can observe. You can watch the object, which is emptiness. You can observe the mind, which is the knower of the emptiness. You can also let go of both the object and the observer. And then after letting go of both, the mind goes into a sublime state as well. Not sublime in a mindless way, but a very subtle and profound mindfulness and concentration. But it's hard to do and very addictive. So being with the body or repeating Putto is far more convenient. It's easy to fix if we get addicted to these, but getting stuck in or addicted to formless objects is difficult to fix. Can you see the mind that's moving and shifting? That's good. Sometimes the mind travels around looking for what it should watch. Maybe I'll take a look at this. Maybe I'll watch that. It's searching. It's like a type of spirit that isn't sure where it's going to be born next, in a good or bad realm. It's searching. That's just like a type of spirit, sampavesi. In the past, I was curious what these spirits were like, because upon death, all beings are reborn immediately. So what kind of being would be one that is a transition period, deciding? The answer is Dhamma practitioners that are looking left and right for where they'll abide next. So they see some movement in the chest and think, okay, I'm going to go look for that now. Getting lost in these things and born into them, the mind clinging to it. The mind's moving down into things. Do you see that? Then there's birth, moving side to side. What should I watch? Okay, I'll watch that. That's just like a sampavesi spirit. Your mind's wandering. Do you know that? Are you familiar with the wandering mind? Practice more samatha. Your mind is quite busy. Question from student number 47. I've been coming to temple and I've been listening to your Dhamma for 2 years. I still feel that I'm not practicing correctly. I'm improving. When I'm angry, I know that I'm angry, but I still follow the anger sometimes. I tried to repeat Putto. Have I been moving in the right direction? Luangpu Pramote said, Yes, and you're doing well. So keep the precepts and keep repeating Putto. However, the mind is, you'll see it, because you're familiar with it. But lots of people repeat Putto and they don't see the mind. Their mind just gets still or in a daze, without mindfulness. That's not useful. What does Putto mean? It means the one that knows, the one who's awake and radiant. Who is it, the one that knows? It's the mind. The mind that has correct samadhi is Putto. So we repeat Putto, and when the mind is a wanderer, then we know so. However the mind is, then know so. Good, but your mind is out a little bit. Can you sense that? The mind is something that Luangpu Dun emphasized as the cause of suffering, and its result is suffering. The mind out doesn't mean just out of the body. Just the mind moving out to the abdomen is called the mind moving out. The mind moving to the breath is also the mind out. So whenever the mind moves, it is out. That's the cause of suffering. Where it's moving to. It's moving to be born. It grasps and clings at becoming, birth, suffering. You're practicing well. Anumotana. Next. Question from student number 91. I've been practicing observing the body in 4 postures. I believe I have automatic mindfulness, often when I'm not thinking about it. In busy periods at work, I'm able to see the mind. Sometimes I see the mind is suffering. It's torture, and the mind is not impartial. Some masters have told me what I've seen might be incorrect. It's made me overthink and have difficulty practicing. Am I over-focusing or holding and unaware of it? Luangpu Pramote said, the easiest test is, it'll be tight if we're focusing. If it's uncomfortable or tight, there's definitely focus. If it's tight and uncomfortable, control is certainly being exercised. I think your practice is fine, but your mind is just a little busy. Watching the body in the 4 positions, standing, walking, sitting, and lying down is an effective practice. But don't hold attention on them and label them. That will be samatha. Just know. See the body standing, walking, sitting, lying down, and the mind is the one who observes, who knows. That's correct, but if we just see the abdomen rising and hold attention there, or lift our foot and the mind slips down to the foot, that's incorrect. How I see it. It's possible that your teacher thinks that's correct. We think about it differently. We're not in any sort of debate, however. Your mind wandered off. Do you know so? It's good if you're able to know. Getting lost and knowing so is right. You're focusing in now. Do you notice that? It's uncomfortable. When the mind is tight like that, it means there's focusing. So become aware until the mind no longer strays or focuses. Focusing in arises out of wanting to be good. If there's wanting to be good, then there will be controlling or focusing. You're lost. Do you know so? Lost in thought. You nodded your head. Did you notice that? The body's moving. You didn't see that. Can you realize that you missed that a moment ago when you nodded your head? You didn't see the body was moving. You were following the mind that went to think. The mind can only know one object at a time. When it's knowing the body, it isn't knowing the mind. When it knows the mind, then it can know forms. It's normal. We can't know 2 things at the same time. Just one at a time. The mind went to think. Did you know so? When the mind goes to think, know so often. You can do it. Now start practicing. Your practice is fine. Question from student number 100. I'm stuck in holding focus. In my formal practice, I observe the body moving and try to be aware during the day. May I have some suggestions for my practice? Luangpu Pramote said, in the beginning, that's how it is. When we start, we all control. People who have never practiced only have one type of mind. It's the mind that's lost. Lost, lost, lost all day long. But once we start to practice Dhamma and try to be aware of our minds, then there will be 3 states. Lost, knowing that we were lost, and then controlling. It's the same for everyone. As we get more skilled, we get lost and then know so. We get lost again and then know so. There are just 2 states left. And then once we practice until the end, all that's left is knowing. There is no more getting lost. So it's nothing peculiar that the mind gets lost. It's completely normal and natural. Just don't get lost for long. If we have a home base, then we won't get lost for long. Except when we get lost in the home base. Some people move their arm and get lost right in the arm. They observe the abdomen and get lost there. Or they get lost in the breath. It is very common. When our mind slips down into something and then we know so, then we won't get lost. When the mind gets lost, it moves away. It really does move. Very good. Your father passed and your mind is still strong. Great. Death is a natural phenomenon of this world. No death would be horrible. Being old or ill and not dying is torture. It's torture for the ill and the children who take care of them. Death, at times, is the loving kindness of nature expressing itself. Those that don't know how to practice have no sense of how to end suffering. Death is their end. Then they're born again and suffer again. They delay their suffering. Practitioners see who it is that dies. It is matter, form that falls apart. It has nothing to do with the mind. The mind itself arises and falls repeatedly all the time. With karma nourishing it, it flows in the current of karma. The consciousness needn't suffer. I was radiant when my father died. I didn't get 1 cent of inheritance, but I was radiant from seeing the truth of what life is really like. The Buddha taught correctly, and my father died as an example of the teachings. We are born, age, fall ill, and die. And that's good enough. Your mind is wandering over there. Are you aware of it? There are 4 minutes left. I won't cheat to you of them. Breathe and be aware of your own mind. Actually, it matters not the lineage of practice you follow. Just know the principles of the practice precisely. If you're going to observe the 4 physical positions, then go for it. The Buddha taught that. But you just need to have the mind that is a knower, that observes the 4 physical positions. In the Abhidhamma, they teach that matter is walking and the mind is the one knowing. It is correct. Matter or form is walking and the mind is knowing. It's not us walking. We know what observes. Just walking, being spaced out, being amused, all of that is useless. Form is moving and mind is knowing. Without the knower mind, we're not really practicing the Dhamma. There won't be aggregate separation. When walking, we'll sense it's us walking. But if there is the knower mind, when walking, we'll see that form is walking. When angry, we'll see the feeling of anger occurred, not that we are angry. You'll be separate and seen that it isn't us that's angry. It's that which is known. So having a separate knower mind, it doesn't matter what meditation object we choose. As long as it's of body or mind, they will all work. There isn't any lineage that's better than another. From that perspective, they're all correct. But if there isn't a knower mind, any practice from there will be incorrect. Some teachers teach that form is walking, and the mind is the one knowing. The form is sitting, the mind is the one knowing. Form is breathing, the mind is the one knowing. They don't teach us to know the breath. They teach us to see that the body is breathing, and that the mind is the one knowing. Just sometimes the language they choose is difficult. It might be more palatable to say, "Can you see that the body's sitting now? Is it hard to do? Right now we're sitting. Do we know so?" Who doesn't know they're sitting? Raise your hand. That's crazy if you don't. It's just so easy. See? Dhamma is easy. But we talk about it until we make it complicated, with so many techniques, and we end up in a tizzy. The Dhamma in Thailand is traditionally taught using the Thai language from the era of the fifth king, Rama V. People in that period could easily understand. But these days, it's hard for us to understand. Some people memorize the phrases from that time and then have to translate it to modern Thai. We have to keep updating our wording when we teach, so that the newer generations can understand. But the original language must be preserved, the Pali language, and we should learn it. Otherwise, as things continue to be translated, the meaning will become distorted from the original teachings. That's why it's important that Pali is still taught. I respect the monks that study Pali. They're preserving the purity of the teachings. But translating to other languages like Thai is still using wording from Rama V. Once translated, no one knows what it means. Only a few people do. I try to stay current with the Thai language. I listen to what the kids these days are saying. A lot of older words have been distorted. Often, words originally with a good meaning end up with a bad one. Languages change, but the Dhamma never does. The mediums through which Dhamma is taught can change and must change, but the content cannot change. That's why I say to the media or communication team that spreads the Dhamma that they can change anything, but not the content of the Dhamma. All the ways that the Dhamma is shared has to adapt. We can't hand out flyers anymore. No one's reading them. Or hand out Dhamma newspapers, putting them on a newsstand. People bowing at the newsstand and grabbing a newspaper. No one would read it. These days, we're reading Dhamma on our iPads and iPhones. So Dhamma has to be available for those devices. Okay, we're out of time.